Alrighty. Hi, everyone. How are we doing today? We are here with Jade Song, the author of Chlorine, which was our October Sapph-Lit fiction pick. And Jade Song is an artist, art director, and writer. Their stories and essays have appeared in Teen Vogue, Electric Literature, and various literary magazines. Chlorine is their debut novel, and you can find them at jadesong.com and also Jade Song on Instagram. And we're going to get to Instagram in a second because I really am so curious about your novel Instagram account. So we're going to talk about that. But first, congratulations on your debut. I know it's been out for a while, but I'd love to know what was the publishing process like for you?
Yeah, sure. Also, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. And of course, thank you to Nina for creating this amazing space. Um, the publishing process was honestly for me, it was a bit tough, I think, because I was quite young. And I think I had been creating art in a vacuum for so long, like just for me and my friends, that to suddenly be thrust in an industry where you kind of have to sell it. That was very tough for me. I think I
Yeah.
was also working full time at the time as an art director. So the balance between having to do all that publicity and like selling your book while also having to like answer to your boss's demands and like actually not get fired so you can pay your rent. I think that was also like a very, very hard balance to make. But I mean, looking back now, I think I learned so much, and it really helped me grow a lot. And it really just solidified that like making art is what I want to do, even if the industry requires so much demand.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, at the time it was very rough, but now looking back, I'm like, I'm happy I went through it.
Yeah. I mean, you have your body horror, girlhood, super weird, like disturbing book, but I feel like there's been this massive resurgence over the last few years in like unhinged women character books. And how do you feel kind of being a part of that trope, especially since it became such a book talk trend and you would see these like Barnes and Noble displays of unhinged women? How does that land for you?
I mean, I think there's a reason why it's so popular. It's because so many of us relate to it. So many of us do feel unhinged. But I think, if I'm honest, I feel like the fact that we're calling how we feel unhinged is a little bit like, no, like there's a reason we are feeling that way. And I feel like to push it into a feeling of abnormality is to kind of say like, oh, we shouldn't be feeling this way. But I think as like a artistic. Oh, yeah, I think just as an artistic genre, I think it's quite fun, especially when you push the boundaries of what's actually real, whether it's through body horror or what the unhinged girly does. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm glad that we're able to write these stories and get them out there, whether it's in film or in books. Just because for so long we've only really had the privilege to see unhinged men, or unhinged straight people. So yeah, it's nice to know that we can have more diversity of unhingedness, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think there's like a fine line between unhinged as reclaiming it and then unhinged as like using it to diminish it in a way and make it smaller and, kind of set aside the feelings as, you know, mental illness versus like actual justified rage, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Um, but yeah, Ren, your character in the book, really brutally describes the gore and horrors of girlhood, which is like another kind of big buzzword over the last couple years, especially with like the Barbie movie. Um, and Ren's kind of detached retrospective as a mermaid, she kind of describes this girlhood with a kind of clarity that I feel like a lot of us don't have in the moment, like when we're experiencing our first period and trying to put a tampon in, for example. Which gold star scene, by the way, I loved it. Um, why did you choose to write Ren from this post mermaid transformation POV? And what freedoms and restrictions did it give you when exploring these super visceral experiences?
Mhm. Um, I wanted to write a different sort of book that really explored the anger and rage. And I think it's like you said, like at the time, a lot of young girls, myself included, and I'm sure you felt this way or other people felt this way. It is very hard to feel the anger because at the time, like you just think it's normal or it's what you're
Mhm.
forced to go through. Um, and I think it's only until later that, at least as an author, I was able to put that rage into words. And I also kind of made it as Ren, the mermaid, like writing it, talking about it from about her past. Like that's the structure of the book because I kind of wanted to make it clear that in at least in my head she's a mermaid. Like I think like that was the point of fiction. Like that's the fun in reading books and like that's the fun in writing and that's the fun in reading because you're able to like imagine a whole different reality and a whole different being for yourself or for these characters. So I think being able to like write her as like looking back on her past life to provide reasoning for why she is the way that she is now,
Mm.
that to me was like a very purposeful choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the kind of other point of view that we get are these letters from Kathy, which are just like so full of sapphic yearning. It was, I have on my like gallery wall over here, I have a sign that says yearning feels better than love, change my mind, which I'm obsessed
What if
with.
yearning is love?
I mean, but is yearning love or is it just like obsession? Because Kathy, like, very deeply obsessed, and Ren kind of treats her like shit. And we love Ren, but we also love Kathy. So yeah, I'd love to talk about their intensely sapphic female friendship, like the tampon scene, like I said, pure gold. But both Ren and Kathy are out of place on the swim team in very different ways. And I'm wondering how you conceptualized her character and what role you see her playing in Ren's mermaid journey.
Mhm. So Kathy to me is a very interesting character because Ren, in a way, is almost inhuman, especially when she becomes the mermaid.
Mm,
Really not a human anymore. Whereas I feel like what makes us so very human is this ability to love. And I mean, it's like you said, is yearning love, is obsession love. I think we all maybe have different definitions. And even if it is a bit toxic, I think if the person thinks it is love, that in their head, even if it is toxic, could be considered that. But I wanted to
yeah,
kind of create a foil to Ren's monstrosity, which is why I wanted to put a character that was like so deeply in her feelings, whereas Ren just kind of like dissociates. So it created
yeah.
contrast. But in terms of helping Ren get to her mermaidhood, I think I wanted I wanted to write a queer story that necessarily didn't always have a happy ending. And I still feel this way with a lot of my work and the stories I want to tell. I think there are a lot of different forms of love that don't just end up in romantic partnership. I think platonic
Yeah.
love is very valid. I think like self love is very valid. And I think art love is very valid. And I love all the queer queer happily ever after stories in Hollywood or in literature today. I think they're all really necessary. But I do really also appreciate stories where there's no like black and white happy ending, because I think there are many different ways to be queer. And I don't think that to validate being queer, you have to be in a very happy romantic relationship. I think, like, yeah, so I think I wanted to show that you can be queer and you can have queer relationships that don't necessarily end in like being together as a partner.
I love that so much. I mean, one of the things we talk about so much in Sapph-Lit is that queerness is expansive and it's, the way you move through the world and the way you disconnect yourself from like white heteropatriarchy. And a lot of that is those kind of platonic friendships and not necessarily like you don't have to be polyamorous in your romantic life, but being more like valuing platonic relationships in the way that you value romantic relationships. So that's like something that we talk about a lot as a book club. Does that like resonate for Ren, do you think, or for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, in my head, like Ren partially goes off into the creek to find other mermaids, so people more
Mm.
like her in her community. And I mean, I think that is partially why platonic relationships and friendships are so important because it just reminds you that you're not alone and it can provide just as wonderful as support as a romantic partnership can be. I wouldn't say chlorine necessarily, especially when I was writing it. I had the words for this. I think actually in my new novel, I'm exploring it a lot more. How platonic relationships should be just as centered as romantic
Yeah.
relationships. But I do think, like, again, I feel like I wrote Chlorine quite young, so I think I can see the early seeds of those ideas of mine in the novel, but I didn't necessarily
Mm.
focus on that in it.
How old were you when you wrote it?
It was 2020, so I was 23 or 24.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Was it like a pandemic project that for
Um,
2020?
it was actually a New Year's resolution, but then the
But
pandemic
then that shit
happened,
happens.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God. Did being in isolation and quarantine in that year shift, did that help you get the work done or did it hinder it or like a bit of both? What was that process like for writing it?
It definitely helped me channel a lot of rage, I think just because of how the government was responding to pandemic
Hmm.
and how, like, just a lot of rage that came from COVID and what happened, like,
Hmm.
across borders, especially since some of my family is in China.
Hmm.
So yeah, it helped me tap into rage. And I mean, in a way, it definitely did help me find the time um,
Mm.
of isolation. But yeah, I would say tapping into rage is the biggest way that year helped.
I love tapping into rage, especially right now. So music and movies play a massive part in Ren's world, like War Kong Wai. I've
Well,
watched his movies and I'm like so tired. But no, Chungking Express, like the scene where Faye Wong is dancing to and singing along to California Dreaming is like one of my favorite scenes in movie history. I think it's so beautiful. And that like scene itself is talked about several times in the book. So I'm wondering what music you listen to while writing, if any, and what what made you choose these references specifically?
yeah, I actually, when I'm writing, I can't listen to music. I need silence or like some sort of low chatter. But I feel like coming of age involves so much media. Whether you're using it as like a guidepost for who you want to become or just using it as entertainment and like soaking it up about and learning about the world. So I feel like to write a coming of age novel, I wanted to include some certain pop culture references. And I also feel like that centered it in date and time for the novel, which was
Mhm.
also important for me. I do think it's interesting that publishing, they often want writers to steer away from like talking about music or talking about specific lyrics, just because
Oh.
of copyright issues, which I understand. But I also am like, so much of who we are as human involves like paying attention to the art that's around us, and music is a really really big part of that, and so are movies and so are other books. So I feel like to write a cohesive world sometimes, especially one that's rooted in reality, that's about coming of age, it's important to bring in those cultural references that like help shape you as an adult.
And also, I mean, Ren's references are uniquely that of a first generation American with Chinese immigrant parents. She's never heard Don't Stop Believing by Journey. She was horrified that Kathy didn't know who Faye Wong was. I mean, also the Costco, were they egg rolls, like the microwavable egg rolls? I thought was a hilarious addition where it's like, yeah, all these moms are like making these like super like elaborate homemade things and like the most delicious thing is like the microwavable thing from Costco. Um, but I'm wondering what elements of your personal experience made your way in there and what was important for you to get across to readers who aren't from immigrant families or communities.
Mhm. I think that, I mean, another reason why I put so many Asian and Asian American references in there is just because that's how I think and that's how a lot of my friends think. So, in a way, yes, it serves to make Ren kind of separate from the white characters in the novel
Mm,
because she has like a different frame of reference for cultural things. But I also, to me it doesn't feel isolating because like that's how I think and that's what I
yeah.
grew up with and that's what a lot of my friends and I talk about. So I think to me it just like kind of reinforces the fact that like Ren in my head is going off to find other people who like truly understand her. And I think like looking back now, I wrote the novel like in a fit of like rage. Like it came from a lot of anger. But I think now I'm realizing like a lot of that anger came from a source of wanting to find love and belonging in what truly felt right. And so even if like Ren and the book honestly is a bit dark and very unhappy and angry, I think there is a lot of hopeful light at the end, even if it is like this bloody, horrible, like kind of violent way. But I'm someone who like loves horror and like loves gore, so I
No,
understand.
literally same. Okay, so I'm like so fine with gore, so fine with body horror. Like I read Manhunt, Tenders the Flesh, A Certain Hunger, and like little to no reaction. I was reading the scene where she was stitching her legs together, and I was like, like, like screaming out loud. My partner was like, what the fuck are you reading? And I was like, read some parts out loud, and he was like, you need to fucking stop right now. But like, I say that so complimentary. It was so, like, it made me feel things like physically in my body while I was reading it. It was like deeply uncomfortable, but so cool. I was like, fuck yeah, do it. But wait, where did my question go? Oh yeah, I want to talk about the ending. Because I mean, I feel like this is such a like big, great act of love on Kathy's part to like help her get out of the hospital. Like I think we were talking about, did she really love her? I think that was like such a selfless act of love on Kathy's end to really help her get what she wants. I mean, same with also her parents kind of understanding um that this is who she is. So she goes to the creek, and then the book ends. So I'm wondering what you imagine Ren's life is like once she makes it there. Like, I mean, there of course are fantasy elements. Like I know, like I believe in mermaids, like in real life. I think they're real. I think 96% of the oceans aren't explored, and they're obviously mermaids somewhere. Um, but yeah, I just want to know like what do you see Ren's life being like in the water?
I mean, I think she tells you. She's like, me and the mermaids are chilling, having fun. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I picture for her. Just like finally in the water, happy, surrounded by other people who understand her and love her.
Yeah. Do you see the mermaids be like the ones that she pasted on her wall, or do you see them as other people who stitched their legs together and were escaping
Mm.
humanity in a sense?
I think that's an interesting question because I think metaphorically, like we all come to who we are differently, but
Mm,
necessarily make us invalid for who we believe ourselves to be.
yeah.
So whether you're this mermaid that's like eating men and like bashing your tail against the rocks, or you're someone who like sewed your legs together, like as long as if you're in your like coven or like your herd, your school of mermaids together with like people you love, it doesn't matter how you got there, as long as you can like learn from it and teach others and share in that story together.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like a metaphor for, I mean, it can be seen as like a trans narrative, it can be seen as a coming out narrative. It's Yeah, I love that. I like me every time I say this every time I talk to an author, and then I immediately want to go back and reread the book with like the new knowledge that I have. Um, but tell me about the research process for these books, because I'm assuming, and I believe I read you were also a competitive swimmer. And but there's also all of this mermaid lore that you draw from, and also like the specificity of the body horror element. Like, how did you research like medical books and like sewing techniques? I'm so curious how you kind of pieced it all together. Pardon the pun, kind of.
Yeah. Mermaid lore wise, there's a book somewhere in my many stacks of books, the Penguin Book of Mermaids. But
Mhm.
it's a really well researched book that is very inclusive about mermaid lore, and where it came from, and it's like very respectful regardless of what groups that the mermaid lore is coming from. So I really enjoyed reading that book. Medical wise, I love this story. One of my really good childhood friends, he was in medical school at the time, and now he's like saving lives in the hospital. But my editor was like, Jade, you have to dial up the body horror. Like, it's not gross enough. And I was like, I literally don't know what it's like to sew skin. So I like furiously texted my friend and was like, you are studying this. Like, tell me what it's like. And I was seeing him the next weekend. And so when we got coffee, he brought like his plastic like slab of skin that he practices
Yeah.
stitching on, but it like mimics exactly what it feels like. And he brought his like medical tools for stitching, and he like held my hand as we like sewed it, so I like learned what it was like. Yeah, and then he read over the part and like told me if it was like medically accurate enough. But yeah, so he was a great help.
I I am so obsessed with that story. Um, but yeah, the technique, like she does it in the shower before the meet and has the water going to like wash the blood all down the drain and like creates like these little like skin flaps and like it's so intricate and the change in her um like her like she's not disassociating as much anymore. Like as soon as she like starts the process, it's like very it's like a process that brings her back into her body like fully into this new form. And then she attempts to swim and obviously all hell breaks loose. Like what were you thinking Ren was imagining other people's reactions going to be? Like, do you really think she was like, I'm going to swim this meet with my body horror tail? Or did she think she was going to get stopped? Like, it's such a hectic, like kind of chaotic scene. So I'm wondering, what are you imagining the other characters thinking, what Ren's thinking, besides like, I need to get to the water?
Hmm. Um, Honestly, in my head, she doesn't care what other people think. I think that's why she
Mhm.
has her legs. I think she's so hyper focused on winning, and
Yeah.
also tied with it, like winning and doing well in swimming is so tied with her like self-image and who she wants to be, that she doesn't really think about other people at that point anymore. She's so focused on how she's going to get there, which is, of course, through the horror of sewing her legs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned earlier that you create dedicated Instagram accounts for each of your bodies of work. Why Instagram? Like, talk to me about that process and how you gather the imagery and why you're sharing it on that platform as opposed to like making a physical mood board or like Pinterest or whatever
Mhm.
else.
Well, I was an art director for 6 years,
Hmm.
and also like I've always been an artist, and I used to be a painter, and I just like I think very visually.
Mm,
Um, so to me, like ideas and scenes come in images, not words. So I think, of course, like I have like quotes pinned up on my bulletin board, etc., for any work of fiction I'm writing, but I think visuals really, really help me think a lot. And I wanted to have a way to remember all of these that was very shareable. And
mm,
so Instagram came to mind, just because it would be images, and also it would be easy for like me and for other people to see the references that any work is inspired by. And I think that's also really important to me because, like personally, I resent it when people when like especially like male artists are like, I this is all my idea, like it came from nowhere, like I'm so original. Because like to me a big part of writing and making art is like being connected to other artists and other people who are making things and other people who love those things. So to me it's like a really great celebration of joining that artistic lineage. So I did never want to
yeah.
create anything in a vacuum. I always want to like share the other references and the ideas that led to whatever I wanted to make. So yeah, I really wanted an easy way for people to see, like, look at all these other amazing things that inspired my thing that's not as good as them. So you can like also go and check those things out. But also it was like for me to help as like inspiration to like look through them and be like, okay, this is the vibe I want. Like this is my mood board, and this will help me like write it out basically.
No, I love that you're celebrating the like visuals or texts or movies, whatever it is that you're in dialogue with. And yeah, I love that. And what you're saying about male artists is like literally so fucking true. I unfortunately know a few people like that. Um, well, you have two other Instagram accounts currently, um, that I know of, but I'd love to know like what's next for you. I know you have another novel coming out and a short story collection. So can you tell us a little bit about those? What do we have to look forward to?
Yeah, so the new novel is coming out spring 2026. I think it's interesting doing chlorine talks now because
Mm,
so much of chlorine again came from anger. And while I really enjoy tapping into rage and it can be productive and useful, I feel like honestly, I feel like writing from this is gonna sound so cheesy, but like writing from love and like appreciating growth and like honestly love and like finding your people to me is like really where I'm writing from now, like this sense of human connection, which is totally opposite from how I felt in Chlorine. So new novel really comes from like so much love and like recognizing that like love is everywhere, not just like from your romantic partner, but like literally from your friends, from your community, from taking care of each other. And it comes also from a sense of like malaise with like, I don't know, you go to protests, you like donate money, but it still feels like it's never enough. But it has to be enough in a way so you can like keep doing it. But
yeah.
yeah, and it's just sorry. And it also lastly comes from like this sense of like preemptive grief. Like personally, like I finally found people like I really, really love in New York and I love New York. And with that came this sense that like, oh my God, like now I have things that I could like lose that I really love and care about. And so like that
Yeah.
itself is like a fear. So I think that's where the novel also came from. But yeah, it feels honestly when I read Chlorine, I'm like, there's more. I wish I could have put more nuance and like honestly some better sentences. And I feel like the new novel is shows that growth. But I'm
Mhm.
sure like honestly, like in 2 years, I'll read a new novel and be like, God, like I could have done all of this better. But yeah.
But it serves as a time capsule. Like you, it's so representative of the time that you were in and who you were at that moment and what you were feeling. And this new novel will also be able to serve that purpose too. So it's like you have a little retrospective to constantly look back on.
That's
What about
what
the
I keep assigning to myself. Yes.
I'm obsessed with this comment from Michaela. I personally feel like Ren is not a girl of nuance. That's so funny.
True.
Um, what
True.
about your short story collection? What's the kind of like through line theme there?
I'd say the through line theme is how I'd say it's maybe how we're all connected. It comes a lot from like Asian and Asian American resources and like past art. So, like for example, there's a retelling of the Fu Manchu monster, and he was like this huge American pop culture icon that was essentially like a white man in yellow face that was like the Chinese like horror specter. But it was like a very racist character, but like he obviously was huge. But it's kind of a retelling of one of those stories. And the other is like there's another story that's a Paul Bunyan retelling, but it's
Hmm.
like Bao Bayan. So like kind of really sorry.
I love that.
So it's like because there were a lot of non-white lumberjacks from India, from
Yeah.
China at that time. So yeah, I don't know. It's I had a lot of fun writing it, and I think I actually it's my probably my favorite book I've written. Actually, I think because it's so rooted in like history and past storytelling, and I was able to have a lot more fun with it in all these different worlds that I can't really do in a novel.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah. I can't wait to read it. I feel like it's so far away. I mean, publishing takes forever
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, I also know you've been adapting Chlorine as a screenplay. What's that like novel to screenplay translation process like, and how's that going?
I have really enjoyed it. I think it was easy for me to translate Chlorine from a novel into a screenplay because so much of Chlorine was inspired by body horror movies.
Yeah.
like Julia Ducournau's Raw, and like Rose Glasses, all of her movies. And I really enjoyed screenplay as another form of another form of storytelling. I will say, well, I don't know how much how much I'm allowed to say. I will say, like, producer wise, I totally get that Chlorine is a very, very, very hard movie to make because the girls are so young and they're doing sexual things,
Mm,
and which just is very different when it's shown on screen. And I totally understand that worry. And it would have to really, really, really be tweaked and done right to make sure it's not like, yeah. So yeah, but on a personal level, I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoy screenwriting, and I'm writing other screenplays that I feel strongly about, and yeah, it's just another way to tell a story.
yeah.
Yeah, Hollywood as an industry is so difficult, but yeah, the art and the
Yeah.
storytelling
I
matters.
mean, if they could make Euphoria, like I believe we could have some body horror Euphoria meet swimming and it'll happen. How's the like how do you approach a screenplay versus a novel if you're working on other screenplays as well right now?
Yeah, honestly, ideas come to me and I know automatically if it's better as a novel or if
Mm,
it's better as a screenplay. I will say I feel like screenplays lack a lot of the feeling that you can put in a novel. So I think more,
yeah.
maybe not shallow, but easier ideas to execute, more basic or ideas that lean more into tropes. Those are the screenplays usually.
Yeah, nice. Well, those were all of my personal burning questions. So now we're going to move on to the rapid fire round. And for those of y'all on the call, if you have any questions for Jade, now is the time to put those in the chat and we will ask them at the end. Okay, rapid fire. What are you currently reading?
Oh my God, I'm reading Intermezzo.
What do you
Yeah.
think? I'm a famous Sally Rooney hater personally.
Oh my God, I love Sally Rooney. I
And I
don't.
love that for you.
Yeah, I really like Intermezzo so far.
Yeah, I still want to read it for like research purposes, but like I can't really do it. I hated Normal People so much.
Wow. Controversial
I'm so,
fan.
no, I know. I don't talk about it online anymore because all of the girlies were like so mad at me. They were like, nah, nah, nah. I'm like, I can't. Okay, what is a book that you recommend everyone to read besides Normal People?
Oh God. The City We Become by N.K. Jemisin, especially if
Mm,
you're in New York.
yes, absolutely. What's a book coming out soon that you're excited to read?
Oh God. I've just been abroad for 2 months, so I'm like
Okay,
um
Slay.
oh God. My friend's book just came out. It's like last week. I don't know if that counts. It's wonderful. It's called How to Fall in Love in a Time of Unnameable Disaster, which is very relevant.
Ooh,
But it's really beautiful. There's features a cockroach sex scene, which I know might turn you off, but it's beautifully written. I highly recommend it.
I'm so gonna read that now. No, you fully sold me. But I mean, yeah, that is a very New York horror because I actually have seen cockroaches having sex. They were having sex in my blender
Wow.
at my last apartment. I threw out the blender.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyways, back to the questions. If you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Probably Audre Lorde, maybe
Yeah.
Toni Morrison, maybe.
You can have like a table if that's more fun.
My grandma. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. My answer is yeah, my mom's godmother is usually mine. Like I want like my mom's godmother and then Anthony Bourdain and I don't know, Taylor Swift and like Dream Blunt rotation right there. Um favorite class you took at university if you went.
None of them. Oh my God. No, yeah, none. Art history, maybe. The photography and the American Dream. We analyzed like newspaper photos for like American forward bias. And I think I really valued that class and I really liked the professor because he was like, fuck grades. I don't give a fuck. And I really love learning. I love reading. I am not the best formal school person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Favorite queer movie or TV show or TV show?
Oh God, there's so many. A movie, I really love Farewell My Concubine. I know it's really sad, but it's a beautiful old Chinese movie, and it features one of my favorite queer Hong Kong actors, Leslie Chung. He was like such a queer Asian icon, and it's a beautiful movie. So,
Oh, I love that. And then favorite queer influencer or celebrity or just person to follow on social media.
um, ooh, I, I, I don't like, I don't know, I don't know.
Is there
I'm
like an Instagram account that you like, you're like, everyone has to follow this?
Oh God. What came to my mind was Sleeping on Gems, which is like they post a lot of like unknown music and working class
Ooh.
history. That's so nerdy. But I really, yeah. Yeah.
No, I love these answers. Okay, let's go to the chat. Um, Shelby said, I don't know if I missed this, but because I came late, but can you tell about your swim experience?
Yeah. I was a competitive swimmer for like 12 years. I was I don't know, maybe I was decent. I was like ranking in states. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
you
was
were decent.
yeah. Distance freestyler. Yeah. Mhm.
What's your relationship with the pool now?
I love the water. I really, really love the water. I love being in it. Love going to the beach. Love being in natural bodies of water. I hate the
Same.
pool. The pool at the corner of my block in Brooklyn, and when I walk past and like smell the chlorine, I'm like, oh my God, PTSD.
No, literally, you're like getting
Oh,
triggered every time you step outside. Yeah. And then Rebecca asks, as a minority myself, I'm curious if there's a piece of advice you have for minorities wanting to publish a novel or something, or enter the literary space, or something you wish you knew when you started.
mm, I think it depends on the stage. No. I think finding your people is the most important thing for me, at least. Like, and they don't have to be like editors or like other authors, but they're just other people who love to write and read, because they'll remind you when you're going through the publishing industry. They'll remind you like how much you really love stories and writing and books. Because I don't know, and I would also say like reading widely, like reading a lot of translated literature helps, because when you're going through the publishing process and it seems like a lot of the stories are like white or heterogeneous, it'll remind you how many actually different kinds of stories there are out there and how many you're able to tell. And it'll like kind of reaffirm the kind of stories you want to tell. Um, yeah. I would also last thing I would say is write the stories you want to write. Like yeah, don't narrow your voice to try to make it palatable for other people. Just be you, I guess.
Uh, Madison asks, can you talk about your experience as an art director and how you got into it so young?
Yeah, I didn't come from money, and I needed like something that could pay my rent. But I'd always wanted to be an artist, and but I hated. I could not do finance, or like I just can't. So I decided to go into advertising. That's what I was as an art director. I was in advertising. And I thought it was really fun when I first started, because you're literally just like coming up with really wild ideas and like getting to go on commercial shoots and like, but I think as time went on, like it's not actually creative, because you're creating ideas for like a client. And there's just like so much excessive waste in each commercial shoot that you're doing. And it's just every capitalist career has its issues. I just think on a personal level, being an advertising art director wasn't what I felt was best for me, but I also needed to pay my rent, and I still do. So I still freelance on the side. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I'm happy to answer anything more if you want any more clarity. I don't know if you want to know like how I got into it or like the paths. But yeah.
Yeah. And then Nina, great name. There is something about the narrative of a perfectionist competitive swimmer, straight A student trying to succeed in all of these areas of her life, throwing off that mantle of responsibility to essentially eject herself from a human existence in favor of something else. That really resonates as an OCD girly. Is there anything like that related to mental health that informed your writing process?
Um, sorry, I always need subtitles for movies. I'm like not a let me wait.
No,
Let me
I
wait.
do too. It's okay.
Growing up, the mental responsibility essentially so differently. Um, I think related to mental health. Uh, yes and no. I think there's a lot of isolation, specifically for chlorine. I think there's a lot of like isolation and depression for Ren, and that kind of makes her dream for this like other reality. And I think like I'm somebody who has depression. Shout out Wellbutrin, um, but I think there's always this like idea of another reality, whether it's through suicide, which I'm not, or just like this better self that you could achieve if you like could just get off the couch, or you could just like sit down and do all the tasks that you were supposed to do. And I think that idea of a better self or just a different reality is something that really informs my writing process. And it's not just from like a personal mental health level. It's also like, okay, like what other world can I imagine where something is different, where maybe something is better, where something is more equitable. Yeah.
Well, those were all of the questions. Do you have anything you want to say to the Sapph-Lities before we sign off?
I don't, but thank you so much for coming. Yeah, happy to answer anything else. So just email me or whatever. And thank you so much for taking the time to read Chlorine. I really appreciate it. So
Thank you for the time, for coming to chat with us. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining.
thank
Bye.
you so much.